Texas is going into their first season in the SEC. How good are they going to be? Are they going to get humbled? Are they going to get exposed? Because the Longhorns are a long way from the Big 12. You're not going to have the luxury of playing Kansas and Kansas State anymore. Like, you're going to be going up against Georgia, Alabama, some of the big boys of the sport. Are you ready? To me, I think Texas is. And if you think that Texas is about to get exposed because they're not ready for the SEC, like, I really have to question your knowledge of college football. And I don't say that to be ignorant. I say that because Texas has always been good enough to compete with any school they play up against. Okay, the resources, we know that those pockets run deep and those wallets are overflowing with money down there in Austin. Okay, they got money to blow and they're really passionate about football down there. It's always been easy to recruit at Texas. It's never been a problem to assemble a talented team down there. The problem has been their lack of good coaching. Well, that's been fixed when they made the decision to hire Steve Sarkisian a few years ago. And he's done an incredible job down there at not only managing the hype and the high expectations that comes with that job, but actually being able to get them, a few plays shy of the national championship last season. Texas also beat Alabama last year in Tuscaloosa, which, the people that are saying, Texas, they're not ready for the SEC. They ain't ready for the big boys. But they beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa, a place that you rarely see Alabama lose at. Alabama has only had a handful of losses this past decade at home, and you can count them on both fingers. Texas already showed that they're good enough to compete with anybody in the SEC, any place, anytime. You want to line it up in the parking lot? Cool. Texas is going to be ready for you. And what they have going into this season isn't as good as a team as what they had last year, but they still are good enough to win the SEC championship. You know that this is going to be an efficient offense. They're going to be well balanced. They're going to be effective on the ground and through the air. They are going to have a top 10 offensive line coming into this year. They landed 2 really good wide receivers in the portal. Isaiah Bond was the number 1 ranked receiver from this past portal cycle. And Matthew Golden, who's a transfer from the University of Houston, he was a top 50 rated player from this portal cycle as well. So you got 2 really good wideouts at your disposal if you're Quinn Ewers, and you're going to have one of the nation's best offensive lines. He should put up Heisman-worthy numbers. And Quinn Ewers, to me, is the most overhated player in college football, not named Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders, I think that the hate for some of the things he does is justified. But for Quinn Ewers, this dude is always getting called overrated when he isn't a bad quarterback. And I think that most people agree. I think that most people will consider Quinn Ewers to be a good quarterback, but not a great quarterback. And that's why he gets so much hate, because he was one of the highest rated recruits coming out of high school in history, and he hasn't really lived up to that level of hype in college football. But that doesn't mean that the dude still isn't one of the better quarterbacks in the game. I still think that he's a top 10 quarterback, and there's been moments when he's looked highly efficient, when he's doing a good job of making good decisions and being accurate with his throws. He's really effective. And I think going into his final season down at Austin, we're going to see the best version of Quinn Ewers that we've yet to see. I feel he's gotten better every single season. Hell, he was good enough to get them to the playoffs. And yeah, they have to win a few games without him, but when he's on the field, they're a better team than what they are when he's not. Now, Arch Manning is sitting behind Quinn Ewers. I'm not expecting to see any quarterback controversy down there for the Longhorns. All right, I just think that people are a little bit over anxious, and that's another reason why people are heading on Quinn Ewers, because they're thinking about the potential that Arch Manning has. But I think that Quinn Ewers walking into the SEC is definitely one of the top 5 quarterbacks that we have in this conference in 2024. And I think that with what he has to work with around him, especially the talent that he has up front blocking for him, sets him up to have a Heisman caliber campaign this year, as long as he can live up to that level of expectation and he can hold up his end of the bargain. Defensively, it's definitely realistic to expect a little bit of a drop off. Is this going to be a top 5, top 10 defense like we saw last year out of Texas? I strongly doubt it. Okay, it's going to be hard to find replacements for Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. But their run defense is going to regress. Their pass defense, though, should improve and take a major step forward. Everybody's been making a big fuss over, how much their secondary struggled at times last year, but they went really heavy in the transfer portal to improve that secondary. They also have a couple of true freshman guys who could compete for some early playing time, and they could make big impacts right away. So I think that defensively for Texas, you still have the talent in place where you should be a top 20, top 30 defense. And your defense is better than the majority of the defenses in the SEC walking into this year, because people make it seem like the SEC has been known for great defense the last couple of years. Like, that's what the SEC used to be in the early 2010s, but the SEC kind of has turned into what we used to know the Big 12 for being: all offense, no defense. Look at LSU, Ole Miss. There were so many teams last year that had awful defenses, but they were putting up points and bunches on offense. So I think that Texas, in terms of what they are year one in the SEC this year, they are a well-rounded team. They don't really have any glaring weaknesses that you look at and you say, oh yeah, that's going to give them trouble. Do they have certain positions where they aren't as talented as compared to others? Yes, but for the most part, it's hard to really look at Texas and be like, oh yeah, like, you played them, this is going to get exploited. They don't really have any significant holes. That's the luxury of being Steve Sarkisian. When you have holes, instead of having to rely on high school recruiting to fix them, you can go in the transfer portal, drop a bag, and immediately find a player who can fix your biggest problem that you had. So I think that Texas is more than equipped to be able to win the SEC this year. Plus, they got an easy schedule as compared to teams like Georgia and Alabama. They play a lot of average or below average SEC teams this year. They got to play Mississippi State, Florida, Arkansas on the road, and Vanderbilt. Those are all guaranteed wins for them. Now, their out-of-conference matchups, we don't even want to talk about that. Their out-of-conference is embarrassing. Outside of Michigan, there's nobody they should lose to out-of-conference. I think they play Colorado State week 1, and then the University of Louisiana Monroe right after that, a few weeks after that. So, out-of-conference and their conference schedule, for the most part, is not that difficult. Now, their toughest games, the games that actually could go either way for them, you're going on the road to Ann Arbor to play Michigan. You should beat Michigan. I don't care if you're playing in a hostile environment. Michigan is not that good this year, and they lose a lot of production. They're going to have a new coaching staff in place. Like, Texas should be able to handle Michigan. If you can go on the road and win in Tuscaloosa, you can win at Michigan. Oklahoma, we know that game can go either way. I think that Oklahoma is just as good as what Texas is coming into this season. You got Georgia, Kentucky, A&M. Realistically, I could see Texas going 12-0. You got more of your tougher games at home. Okay, the only tough road games you have are Michigan and A&M, and you can win those games because those teams aren't as good as you. And your home games against Georgia, you can be able to win that one. In Kentucky, you should be able to win that one also. Now, Oklahoma, that's a neutral site game, but, that game's always a toss-up. Really, the Oklahoma game is the only one that I really think you have a legit shot to lose outside of Georgia. Now, the floor, what if everything goes wrong for Texas? What's the worst-case scenario for the Longhorns this season? I see it being 9-3. Okay, let's say you go on the road and you get beat by Michigan. Then you lose again to Oklahoma. Then you end up dropping one to either Georgia, Kentucky, or Texas A&M. That's how you get your 3 losses right there. But even with 3 losses, with how tough the SEC is and how oversaturated this conference has become, you can still get into the playoffs as a 3-loss team. So either way, Texas is in a great position to not just win the SEC with how favorable of a schedule they have, but also due to how good they are, the talent that they have in place, how well they recruited. This is a team that's more than prepared for the toughest conference in college football. But for them to get exposed, that they would need a lot of things to go right or a lot of things to go left. And I just don't see that happening. I think Steve Sarkisian has proven that he is a really good coach. And, he's going to do what it takes to be able to put Texas in the right position to win. They've been doing really good in recruiting. They've been crushing in the portal. If you just think that Texas ain't good just because they've been playing in the Big 12, they're not going to be ready for the SEC. Like, you need to go do some more homework on Texas, because this school has always been good enough to win in any conference that they play in, rather it be the Big 10, the SEC, whoever. If you tell Texas you want to play some football, they can beat you anytime, any place, as long as they got some elite coaching.